Hey class, welcome back. Okay, this is going to be part two of Marx, and this will be the final lecture of the Marx reading. All of these readings are pretty short. So, chapter two, proletarians and communists. This is the part where he really lays out. So I guess the first chapter was really like a historiography of um, a- sort of how economic structures break down and what industrialization is doing, and sort of the future of industrialization and how it will affect the laboring class. The second chapter is really sort of laying out the exact rules of the communist platform. So, first, he says the communists are distinguished from the other working class parties by only, number one, in the national struggle of the proletarians of the different countries, they point out and bring to the front the common interests of the entire proletariat independently of all nationality. So he's saying, we're not ethnically based. We're basically based on bringing out all laborers in a society, regardless of what political platform you may be a part of. They also espouse no real differences in gender, or in race, or ethnicity, or religion, etc. Number two, in the various stages of development which the struggle of the working class against the bourgeoisie has to pass through, they always and everywhere represent the interests of the movement as a whole. Okay, so he moves on to the goals of the Communist Party. The first goal is the formation of the proletariat into a class, right? So that's much of what his first chapter is about. This The second is the overthrow of the bourgeois supremacy. And man, this includes a lot, which we'll talk about later. This includes sort of overthrowing the governmental system, overthrowing private property rights, overthrowing the way that labor works, overthrowing the global financial system, overthrowing sexual mores and marriage, overthrowing religion. Uh, Man, a lot. Okay, and then number three, conquest of political power by the proletariat. So, build a proletariat, destroy the bourgeois, and then take over the state. Um, and then he talks about some criticisms that some other philosophers, politicians, state leaders, etc., have thrown out about communism. And the first is about property rights. And he says, the abolition of existing property relations is not at all a distinctive feature of communism. The theory of the communists may be summed up in a single sentence: abolition of private property. Its existence for the few is solely due to its non-existence in the hand of those nine-tenths. You reproach us, therefore, with intending to do away with a form of property, the necessary condition for whose existence is the non-existence of any property for the immense majority of society. In one word, you reproach us with intending to do away with your property. Precisely so. That is just what we intend. So he's saying, no, we just want to overthrow the sort of bourgeois property system wherein, 90% of all land is owned by 1% of the population, which basically still exists. Marx claims that the bourgeoisie are also destroying family relations. So one of the criticisms is that they want to get rid of marriage, and Marx claims that the bourgeoisie are destroying family relations and marriage um, in and of themselves, right? And it's all based on money. And this is where he points out that, you get parents willing to sell their kids into work and even sex slave. You get women who often have to sell themselves into prostitution to feed their kids or themselves. And so Marx basically says they're trying to abolish the modern bourgeois marriage system for what he calls, quote, free love. He never really defines it. I'm not really sure. Um, okay, and then he goes on and says that another sort of criticism of Marxism is that communism is trying to destroy the concept of nationality, and Marx and Engels say yes, absolutely. And he offers this really utopian quote, right? He says, in proportion as the exploitation of one individual by another will also be put to an end, The exploitation of one nation by another will also be put to an end. In proportion as the antagonism between classes within the nation vanishes, the hostility of one nation to another will come to an end. So, he's basically saying that we're going to see this proletarian uprising in every society across the earth. We will no longer see ourselves as, American or Canadian or Mexican or Lithuanian or whatever. Um, or even like Catholic or Protestant, we will see ourselves as proletarians, right? And all in solidarity against the bourgeoisie. Okay, and then he offers his sort of main manifesto, right? And he offers, I think it's 10 rules here. These are the rules of the Communist Party laid out by Marx and Engels. One, the abolition of property in land and application of all rents of land to public purposes, right? So we should have communal land. Two, a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. This is a very European thing. It used to be a very American thing until basically the Reagan era. But America had an incredibly progressive tax rate system when we were booming in the 50s and 60s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And then sort of Reagan came in and cut taxes, and the I don't know. It's arguable whether that was good or bad. You know, a lot of people said that sort of deregulation and stuff really led to the collapse of 2008 and to some of our severe deficit problems. And most economists think that trickle down doesn't work. So anyway, number three, abolition of all rights of inheritance. So you cannot sort of pass on your super wealth to your family members. That's a big problem in the United States when they got rid of the capital gains tax. And there are now hyper wealthy individuals who will pull a bait and switch, basically, where they'll put all of their assets um, they'll put up all of their assets to an insurance company, and then they'll take out a massive loan to simply pay their sort of daily income, their rent, their taxes, all these sort, their mortgage, their taxes, whatever. So, I'll take out a $2 million loan this year. But since it's a loan and you're paying it back automatically from your wealth that's been stored in an insurance company, basically, nothing counts as income, right? And so you not only don't pay an income tax on that loan, you also don't pay any taxes on your sort of dividends and that insurance policy and your assets, and then you can pass it on to your family without being taxed either. And so a lot of people, including me, who say that we're supposed to live in a meritocracy, are seeing the real problems with this style of passing on extraordinarily wealth to people who arguably didn't earn it. So anyway, number four, confiscation of the property of all immigrants and rebels. So if you leave the country or if you rebel a country, you lose everything. Number five, centralization of credit in the banks of the state by means of a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. So this did not happen in the United States, but this was a Hamiltonian idea. Alexander Hamilton wanted, and I think Madison wanted to put in a national bank that could make good strategic decisions about um, which businesses or strands of business or whatever would be best for the American state. Number six, centralization of the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. So this would be a lot like Europe or Japan, where they basically provide free internet, and then all of the sort of high-speed railway and the busing systems and all of that are very high tech and very um, well maintained, whereas the United States is very fractured when it comes to our communications systems. And transportation is always fractured. And like our railway system is 40, 50 years behind technologically. Um, railway crashes are increasing year on year in the United States. This is some data a lot of people don't know about, but we have real problems with our infrastructure in this country, especially our railways. Okay, number 7, extension of factories and instruments of production owned by the state. The bringing into cultivation of wastelands and the improvement of the soil generally in accordance with a common plan. So basically, like, the state owns the means of productions, and the state is sort of owned by the citizens, and a real focus on agriculture is important, at least during that time. Number 8, equal obligation of all to work. Establishment of industrial armies, especially for agriculture. And of course, there are exceptions, for small children and for those who are unable to, physically or mentally work. But there is an obligation to provide for your society. Number 9, combination of agriculture with manufacturing industries, gradual abolition of all the distinction between town and country by a more equitable distribution of the populace over the country. This has been disastrous. This is probably the most disastrous communist idea that has ever been played out, right? So we saw this play out in at least 2 different societies. In Stalinist Russia, Lenin basically committed the Red Terror and killed all the capitalists, and killed all of the landowners of the kulaks, which were sort of small farm holdings. And then when Lenin died, Stalin enforced massive ruralization, basically, where he forced people into agriculture. The problem was they killed everyone who knew shit about agriculture, right? They killed all of the farmers, anyone who had owned land. So they didn't really know how to farm. They were technologically backward. Um, and the ruralization of the country decimated many of their industries. Millions upon millions died of hunger, and even one of the main issues that Ukraine has with Russia is that during the Stalinist terrors, even after Hitler had been defeated and Nazism had been defeated, Ukraine remained in the Russian influence, even though they had tried to fight a revolution to escape from it. And Stalin basically starved the entire nation. He took all agricultural production. Ukraine is one of the sort of grain producers of the entire planet. He took all the agricultural production, took all of the food. They would literally send soldiers into people's homes and take food out of their. They probably didn't have refrigerators, but they would take food out of their pantries. They would literally take dinner out of the oven. And more than 4 million Ukrainians died because Stalin starved them all to death. And that's much of the Ukrainian resistance against Russia today that Americans don't understand is this massive starvation under the Stalinist purges. There was also Mao Zedong's Cultural Revolution, right, where he tried the same thing. They killed all the quote unquote academics or whatever, under when they kicked out the Kuomintang from China after the Long March. Mao Zedong took over, and they basically had the Cultural Revolution. They killed all the landowners. They killed all the academics. They killed anyone who was considered to be smart or whatever it was. And then they tried to do mass agriculturalization, and it was a complete fucking failure, and tens of millions died. And so this number 9 has been one of the most horrifyingly devastating ideas in all of humankind, probably. So anyway, keep that in mind. It has never worked out well. Another example would be Zimbabwe, right? Robert Mugabe expropriated all the land from the white people and basically kicked them out of the country, exiled them. And I'm not saying there weren't problems, right, with white colonialism and all of these things, but what happened is there was no more expertise, and so when the black Zimbabweans took over the land, there was mass famine and starvation. I mean, no one knew how to run a farm. And so this is what we find over and over and over and over and over and over again. Okay, the final rule: free education for all children in public schools, abolition of children's factory labor in its present form, and combination of education with industrial production, etc. And then I will leave chapters 3 and chapter 4 to y'all. Really interesting stuff, but we really hit on the main points, which are in his first 2 chapters. So, thanks so much for being here, and I'll see you for Frederick Douglass for the next one.